The crystal chandeliers above the grand dining room in Buckhead cast a cold light over the memorial dinner. My suit felt heavy, too tight across the shoulders as I stood near the edge of the VIP section. This was supposed to be about Brenda, about celebrating 38 years of marriage, but Marcus had turned her memorial into a networking event. My son, 39 years old, was holding court in the center of the room. He wore a custom-tailored suit, a silk tie holding a glass of champagne like he owned the entire estate. I watched him laugh with a state senator, ignoring the framed photograph of his mother on the memorial table. I took a step forward, wanting to adjust the flowers near her picture. "Dad," Marcus said, stepping quickly into my path. His voice was low, sharp, completely void of the warmth he had just shown the senator. "What are you doing over here?" "I just want to fix the lilies," I said, looking at Brenda's beautiful smile in the photograph. They are falling to the side, and she always hated messy arrangements. Marcus sighed, an ugly sound of pure impatience. "Leave the flowers alone, Dad. The catering staff will handle it. You are distracting the guests." I looked around the room at the people sipping expensive wine, people Brenda never even knew in her entire life. Distracting them from what, Marcus? This is your mother's memorial. We are supposed to be honoring her memory. It is a celebration of life. He corrected, his jaw tightening as he looked around to make sure no one was listening. "And these people are important clients, Dad. I need this to go smoothly. You sitting here looking like you are attending a funeral from 1990, it brings the mood down. Why do not you head back to the main hall, have some of the buffet?" My chest tightened, a familiar ache settling right behind my ribs. He was dismissing me, sending me away like a hired hand who had wandered into the wrong room. He gestured to a security guard standing near the velvet rope, a silent threat that he would have me removed from my own wife's memorial. "Marcus," I said, my voice quiet, steady, refusing to let him see the hurt. "I am not leaving her table. She belongs with family, not business associates." "You are not staying in this section," he replied, stepping closer, his expensive cologne masking the sweet smell of the lilies. "You are embarrassing me, Dad. Look at you. You are clutching those broken glasses like a crazy person. Put them away and go mingle with the cousins in the back. You do not belong here with these people." I looked down at my hands. I was holding Brenda's reading glasses, the ones she wore every single day. The left hinge was snapped in two. I had found them in her desk drawer this morning, exactly where she left them 5 months ago. My knuckles were white, gripping the thin metal frames. I felt a sudden sharp clarity. The wealth he was flaunting, the rented estate, the imported champagne, the politicians, it was all smoke. It was a desperate performance, and I was ruining his perfect aesthetic. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice, because a man who knows his own strength does not need to shout. I just looked at the son I had raised, the boy I had taught to throw a baseball in the Georgia heat, and I saw a complete stranger. I registered the profound ingratitude, the absolute disrespect dripping from his words, and I turned my back on him. The security guard shifted, preparing to intervene, but I walked past him without a single word. The noise of the party faded as I moved through the grand foyer, out the heavy oak doors, and into the cool Atlanta night. The valet brought my car around an old but pristine sedan that Marcus constantly mocked for being out of style. I climbed into the driver's seat, the leather familiar and comforting after the coldness of that house. The valet closed the door, shutting out the sounds of the estate entirely. I sat there in the quiet, the broken glasses resting gently on the passenger seat. My hands were perfectly still now. The sadness was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out my phone, and dialed a number I had hoped I would never need to call. It rang twice before a sharp professional voice answered. "Renee," I said, staring straight ahead at the closed iron gates of the estate. "It is Isaiah." Isaiah, the top-tier lawyer, replied, her voice softening just a fraction. It is late. Is everything all right? No, I said, my voice hard, precise, cutting through the silence of the car. Cancel the will, Renee. All of it. Everything goes into a blind trust immediately. I need to see you first thing in the morning. Something is fundamentally wrong with Marcus, and I'm going to find out exactly what he's hiding. There was a brief pause on the line, the sound of a woman who understood when a man had reached his absolute limit. I will see you at 8, Isaiah. I ended the call. The engine turned over with a quiet hum, and I drove away from the estate, leaving my son to his empty, rented kingdom. I did not know it yet, but the dominoes had already started to fall, and Marcus had absolutely no idea what kind of storm was coming for him. The morning sun hit the pavement of Sweet Auburn Avenue hot and unforgiving. I parked my sedan in front of a faded brick storefront. Andre stood behind the counter of his optical shop, a fixture in this neighborhood for 30 years. Andre and I went way back, all the way to our days building houses out in Decatur. When Brenda passed, he closed his shop for 2 days just to help me sort through the garage. He was a good man, a loyal friend. The bell above the glass door chimed as I walked in. The shop smelled of lens cleaner and old wood. Andre looked up from adjusting a pair of wire frames, his face breaking into a wide smile. Isaiah, my brother, he said, setting the frames down. It is good to see you. You want some coffee? I need a favor, Andre, I replied, walking up to the glass counter. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the broken glasses. I set them down carefully between us. Brenda's reading glasses. The left hinge snapped yesterday. Andre looked at the glasses, his smile fading. He knew what these meant to me. He knew she never took them off. He picked them up with gentle hand, turning them over under the bright overhead light. Let me take a look in the back, he said softly. I will see if I can salvage the frame. I stood alone in the quiet shop, listening to the hum of the air conditioner. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The door to the back room opened, but Andre did not come out. He just stood in the doorway, his face ashen, looking like he had seen a ghost. Isaiah? He said, his voice completely hollow. You need to come back here, right now. My stomach dropped. I walked past the display cases and stepped into his cluttered workshop. Andre was sitting in front of his computer monitor. The glasses were resting on his desk, but they looked different. The metal arm was separated, revealing a tiny hidden port tucked inside the hinge. A small cable connected the glasses to his computer. What is that? I asked, stepping closer. Andre pointed at the screen with a trembling finger. I do not know, he whispered. I was trying to weld the joint and I noticed a seam. I popped it open and I found this micro drive. There are video files on it, Isaiah. Lots of them. All from April. April. The month I lost her. The month everything fell apart. Play it, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Andre clicked the mouse. The screen went black for a second, then a grainy image appeared. It was my kitchen. The sunlight was pouring through the window over the sink. I could see the edge of the marble island. The bowl of green apples Brenda always kept fresh, the oak cabinets. I installed myself 20 years ago. Then a figure walked into the frame. It was Marcus. He was wearing his gray workout clothes, sweating lightly, looking around the empty kitchen. My breath caught in my throat. He moved quickly with absolute purpose. He opened the top cabinet, the one where Brenda kept her daily vitamins and blood pressure medication. What is he doing? Andre asked quietly. I could not answer. I just watched my son reach into his pocket and pull out a small plastic bag. Inside the bag were dozens of small white pills. He unscrewed the cap of Brenda's vitamin bottle. He did not hesitate. He poured the white pills into the bottle, shook it to mix them in, and put the bottle right back on the shelf. The entire sequence took maybe 20 seconds. He washed his hands at the sink, dried them on Brenda's favorite yellow dish towel, and walked right out of the frame. The video ended freezing on the empty kitchen. The silence in the back room was deafening. I felt like the floor had opened up beneath me, pulling me down into a dark, suffocating hole. My son. My own flesh and blood. The boy I held in my arms, the man I put through law school, had just stood in my kitchen and poisoned his own mother. Andre turned to me, his eyes wide with absolute horror. "Isaiah," he stammered. "Isaiah, what did we just watch?" I looked at the glasses sitting on the desk. Brenda knew. She knew something was wrong and she was watching him. She recorded her own murder and she left the evidence for me to find. The grief that had been drowning me for 5 months suddenly vanished, burned away by a rage so intense it made my vision blur. Andre's hand hovered over the mouse. He looked terrified, like he was afraid of what the next click would unleash upon my life. He was a good friend, a peaceful man, and this evil had just walked right into his sanctuary. "Isaiah, maybe we should call the police right now," he suggested gently. "This is beyond us, man. This is a crime scene on that computer." "No," I said sharply. The word hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Marcus is a high-powered attorney. He knows the judges. He knows the district attorneys. If I go to the police with one video of him pouring unknown pills, his defense team will bury it. They will say it was a supplement or a mix-up or some other lie. We need to see everything she left us. We need to know exactly what he did and why he did it. I placed my hand on Andre's shoulder, feeling the tension in his muscles. "Play the next file, my friend. I need to see the truth." Andre nodded slowly, turning his attention back to the bright monitor. He moved the cursor to the second video file, double-clicked, and the screen flickered back to life. I stood perfectly still, my jaw locked, bracing myself for the devastation that my wife had captured from beyond the grave. The screen flickered and the kitchen appeared again. It was nighttime now, the only light coming from the small lamp over the stove. Marcus walked into the frame, pacing back and forth, holding his cell phone to his ear. His voice was low, but Brenda must have left her glasses right on the marble island because the hidden microphone picked up every single word. "It is done," Marcus said, running a hand over his face, looking exhausted but determined. "I swapped her pills this morning so it will look exactly like a massive heart attack." A woman's voice came through the phone speaker, thin, trembling, and full of panic. It was Kendra, my daughter-in-law. The woman who always smiled so sweetly at our Sunday dinners. The woman Brenda treated like her own flesh and blood. "Are you sure?" she sobbed, her voice breaking through the static. "Marcus, if they find out, if anyone checks those pills, we are both going to prison for the rest of our lives. They will not find out." He snapped his pacing, getting faster, his tone turning vicious. "The medical examiner is not going to run a full toxicology screen on a 68-year-old woman, especially one with a documented history of high blood pressure. Potassium chloride leaves the system fast, Kendra. It is completely untraceable unless they are specifically looking for it and nobody is going to look." Kendra let out a sharp, terrified breath. "The guys from the underground club came by the house today, Marcus. They said if we do not have the $900,000 by the end of the month, they are going to take it out on me. They threaten my life, Marcus. They know where our kids go to school. I will handle the street guys," he said, his voice cold, calculating, devoid of any real empathy. "Once Mom is gone, I automatically control the family trust. Dad will be so wrecked by grief he will sign over the general power of attorney without even reading the documents. We pay off your gambling debt, we clear the books, and we are finally free." The video ended, cutting back to the dark screen. I felt Andre looking at me, his breathing heavy, but I kept my eyes locked on the monitor. $900,000. My only son was trading his own mother's life just to cover his wife's degenerate gambling debts with Atlanta street thugs. "There is one more file," Andre whispered, his hand shaking so badly he could barely grip the computer mouse. "Play it," I commanded, my voice entirely devoid of emotion, sounding like it belonged to a different man. The final file opened. The timestamp in the corner read April 15th, 2:40 in the morning. The kitchen was dark, lit only by the pale moonlight coming through the blinds. Brenda walked into the frame wearing her favorite blue robe, the one I bought her for our anniversary. She reached for a glass of water by the sink, her hand visibly trembling. Suddenly, she clutched her chest, her knees buckling beneath her, and she collapsed hard onto the heavy tile floor. My heart stopped beating inside my chest. I was watching my wife die. A moment later, Marcus stepped into the dim light. He was fully dressed, wearing his suit trousers and a dress shirt. He walked over to where his mother lay gasping on the floor, her hand reaching up weakly toward him. He did not kneel down to help her. He did not touch her face or hold her hand. He just stood there, towering over her, his hands casually shoved in his pockets, staring down at the woman who gave him life. He raised his left wrist, checking his expensive silver watch. He watched her struggle for every single breath. He watched the light slowly drain out of her eyes. I counted the minutes in my head, the agonizing, endless minutes, as my son stood over my dying wife, calculating the exact moment she would be gone forever. 12 minutes passed. 12 minutes of absolute, calculated evil recorded in cold, silent definition. When she finally stopped moving, when her chest fell still, Marcus pulled his cell phone from his pocket. He dialed a number, his posture completely relaxing, his shoulders dropping. Then his voice changed entirely, filling with a fake, frantic terror that deserved an Academy Award. 911. "Please help me," he screamed into the phone, his voice echoing in the empty kitchen. "My mother just collapsed. I think she's having a massive heart attack. Please, you have to hurry. Please save her." Andre slammed his hand onto the keyboard, pausing the awful video tears streaming freely down his weathered face. "I cannot watch anymore, Isaiah," he choked out, turning away from the screen. "God forgive him. I cannot watch it." I reached out with a steady hand, taking the small flash drive from the port hidden inside the glasses. I closed my fist around it, the metal edge biting sharply into my palm. I did not shed a single tear. The man who could cry over this betrayal was dead, buried right alongside Brenda in that cold Georgia ground. "Thank you, Andre," I said, turning my back on the desk, my voice hard as iron. "Keep the glasses, my friend, because I have what I need." "Isaiah, wait, what are you going to do?" he called out, following me quickly into the main shop. "You cannot do this alone, man. This is too big." "I'm not alone," I replied, pushing the heavy glass door open, letting the bell chime ring out. "I have the truth." The Atlanta heat hit me the second I stepped outside onto the pavement, but I felt nothing but ice running through my veins. I walked to my old sedan, unlocked the door, and slid into the familiar driver's seat. I placed the flash drive carefully in my breast pocket, right over my heart, securing the weapon Brenda had left me. I pulled out my phone, scrolling past Marcus, past the family group chats, selecting the contact I had spoken to the night before. Renee Carter was a legal shark, a high-rise attorney who destroyed corrupt corporations for a living, and right now, she was exactly the kind of monster I needed on my side. She answered on the very first ring. "Isaiah, you are early. Our meeting is not for an hour. Change of plans." "Renee?" I said, starting the engine, my voice perfectly level, deadly calm. "The blind trust is not enough anymore. I'm coming to your office right now, and we are going to completely dismantle my son. I want his accounts, his assets, his entire life stripped down to the absolute studs. Get Tyrone Woods in the room with you, because we need a forensic accountant immediately." "Isaiah, what happened?" she asked, her professional tone shifting instantly to high alert. "My son killed Brenda," I stated, pulling the car out into the heavy midday traffic, leaving the old neighborhood behind. "And he is going to pay for it with everything he has in this world." The elevator doors slid open on the 50th floor of the Bank of America Plaza in Midtown Atlanta. The reception area was entirely polished black marble, overlooking the sprawling city below. It was a space of silent, ruthless efficiency. This was the kind of firm that charged by the minute, the kind of place you only visited when you needed to completely destroy someone. I walked past the receptionist without a word, heading straight for the corner glass conference room. Renee Carter was already waiting. She stood by the floor-to-ceiling window wearing a pristine white suit, her expression sharp and calculating. Sitting at the heavy mahogany table was Tyrone Woods. Tyrone was a forensic accountant, a man who spent his life hunting down stolen money, a man who could find a single hidden dollar buried under a mountain of shell companies. I did not offer a greeting. I walked to the table, reached into my breast pocket, and pulled out the small silver flash drive. I placed it on the polished wood, pushing it precisely to the center of the table. "What is on the drive?" Isaiah Renee asked. Taking her seat, her dark eyes locked on the metal casing. "My wife recorded her own murder," I said, my voice completely empty, cold. "My son poisoned her, and he watched her take her last breath on our kitchen floor." The silence in the room was absolute. Renee did not gasp. She did not cover her mouth because she was a predator in a courtroom. She simply picked up the drive, plugged it into her sleek laptop, and clicked the files. Tyrone leaned in his face tight. For 20 minutes, the only sound in that expensive glass room was Marcus discussing lethal potassium chloride, Kendra crying about her gambling debts, and the heavy, agonizing silence of Brenda fighting for her life. When the final video ended, Renee closed the laptop. Her face was a mask of pure, concentrated fury. "We are going to bury him under the prison, Isaiah," she stated, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I will call the district attorney right now. We can have a warrant for his arrest before noon." "No," I commanded, leaning forward, resting my hands on the table. "If we arrest him now, his defense lawyers will claim the video is altered. They will drag it out. They will try to grant him bail. I do not just want him in a cell, Renee. I want to know exactly why my wife had to die. I want to know where my money went." I turned my attention to the accountant. "Tyrone, you have had access to the family trust since I called this morning. Show me the bleeding." Tyrone opened his own laptop, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He projected his screen onto the large monitor on the wall. A massive spreadsheet appeared, covered in red lines and highlighted transactions. "Isaiah, your family trust was established with $2.4 million. Tyrone began adjusting his glasses, keeping his tone strictly professional. "It is supposed to be locked, requiring dual signatures for any withdrawal over $50,000. But Marcus is the managing attorney for the trust. He found a loophole. He's been bleeding the accounts dry for 14 months. How much? I asked, my chest tightening as I looked at the endless rows of red numbers. $420,000, Tyrone answered, pointing to a specific column. He was smart about it. He took $20,000 here, $30,000 there, always keeping the transfers just under the bank alert threshold. He routed the money through 3 different shell companies, all registered under Kendra's maiden name. Where did it go? Renee asked, taking rapid notes on her legal pad. Tyrone brought up a new document, a series of scanned collection notices and underground ledger photos. Kendra Mitchell has a severe gambling addiction, he explained, pulling up a photograph of a notorious underground casino in South Atlanta. She got in deep with a local syndicate, the kind of men who do not take you to civil court when you miss a payment. They hold a marker on her for $900,000. Marcus stole the $400,000 to keep them at bay, but the syndicate lost patience. They gave Kendra a final deadline. When was the deadline? I asked, the pieces of this horrific puzzle snapping together in my mind. April 30th, Tyrone said, looking me directly in the eye. 2 weeks after Brenda passed away. My blood ran completely cold. Brenda had discovered the missing money in March. She had confronted him. She had threatened to cut him off to expose him, and Marcus realized he was about to lose his access to the trust. With the syndicate threatening his wife and Brenda threatening his freedom, he made his choice. He eliminated the obstacle. But 400,000 is not 900,000, Renee pointed out, her legal mind working steps ahead. He is still $500,000 short, Tyrone. The mob is not going to just walk away. How is he planning to pay the rest of the debt? Tyrone hesitated, his fingers resting heavily on the keyboard. He looked at Renee, then he looked at me, a profound sadness crossing his face. Because Brenda passing away did not give him full control of the assets, Isaiah. You are the primary beneficiary. The trust defaults to you. To get the rest of the money to clear Kendra's debt and save his own life, he needs total control of your estate. He needs me out of the way, I said, the reality hitting me like a physical blow. Yes, Tyrone confirmed quietly. He needs you incapacitated, or he needs you gone. My phone vibrated violently against the mahogany table, shattering the heavy silence. I looked down at the glowing screen. It was Marcus. My son was calling me right on schedule, exactly as the panic of his unpaid debts started closing in on him. Renee watched the phone buzz, her eyes narrowing. Do not answer it, Isaiah. We need to formulate a strategy. We need to lock down your personal accounts before he can make a move. I picked up the phone, feeling the vibration humming against my palm. He does not know I have the videos, I said, staring at his name on the screen. He thinks I'm just a grieving, broken old man. Let him think he is winning Renee. Let him walk right into his own trap. I swiped the screen, accepting the call, and raised the phone to my ear. Dad, Marcus, said, the fake warmth in his voice completely gone, replaced by a thin, wired energy. Where are you? I've been calling your cell all morning. I'm just out for a drive, Marcus. I replied, keeping my tone perfectly flat, playing the role of the exhausted widower. Just trying to clear my head. You need to come home, Dad, he insisted, the panic bleeding through the phone line. We have a serious problem. The bank is doing a routine audit on Mom's estate, and they are threatening to freeze your personal accounts. I looked across the mahogany table at Tyrone. The accountant was already shaking his head, typing furiously on his laptop. He turned the screen toward me. It was not a bank audit. Tyrone had just pulled up Kendra's personal checking account. It was frozen, locked down by a shell company operating out of South Atlanta. The mob was cutting off their oxygen. A freeze, I asked, letting a fake tremor enter my voice. Why would they freeze my accounts, Marcus? I have not done anything wrong. It is just bureaucratic red tape, Dad. He lied smoothly, the desperation making him talk too fast. But we need to get ahead of it. I drafted a general power of attorney this morning. It just gives me the legal right to handle the bankers on your behalf, to protect your assets so you do not have to deal with the stress. You are in no condition to handle this right now. I felt Renee's eyes on me, a fierce, protective focus. She slid a yellow legal pad across the table. Written in bold black ink was one word. Refuse. I appreciate you looking out for me, son, I said, staring at the legal pad. But I think I need to read those documents first. Maybe have a lawyer look them over. Dad, we do not have time for that. Marcus snapped the facade of the caring son, completely shattering. His voice rose, echoing in the quiet conference room. I am a lawyer. I am your son. Do you not trust me to protect our family? If you do not sign this today, the state could tie up your money in probate for years. You will not be able to pay the mortgage. Let them tie it up, I said quietly. I have enough cash to buy groceries, Marcus. I'm not signing anything today. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was a low, vicious threat disguised as concern. Kendra is a wreck, Dad. The kids are confused. We need stability. I'm coming to the house tonight at 7 and I'm bringing the paperwork. Be there. He hung up the phone before I could answer. The dial tone buzzed in my ear, a flat mechanical sound in the silent room. I set the phone down on the table. He is panicking, Renee stated, leaning back in her leather chair. A general power of attorney gives him the keys to the kingdom, Isaiah. He could drain your personal checking, sell your property, take out loans in your name. He would have the $500,000 by tomorrow morning. And Kendra's accounts, I asked, turning to Tyrone. Locked tight, Tyrone confirmed, closing the spreadsheet. The South Atlanta syndicate operates a predatory lending front. They just slapped a lien on her car and froze her debit cards. They are squeezing him, showing him they can touch his family whenever they want. He has less than 48 hours before they stop freezing accounts and start breaking bones. He said he is coming to my house tonight at 7, I said, looking out the massive window at the Atlanta skyline. He sounded desperate, Renee. Desperate enough to do something stupid if I refuse to sign. You are not going back to that house, Renee ordered, her tone shifting from legal advisor to protector. You are too vulnerable there. If he realizes you know about the money, he will not hesitate to use violence. He already killed Brenda. He will not lose a second of sleep over taking you out to save himself. I have to go back, I replied, my voice hard, resolute. The original deed to the house, the physical titles to the cars, they are all in a firebox in my home office. If he gets his hands on those documents, he can forge my signature and leverage the properties anyway. I need to secure the paper trail before he burns it to the ground. Renee shook her head, her face completely serious. Isaiah, listen to me. Marcus is cornered, and a cornered animal is the most dangerous kind. You are walking into a trap. It is my house, Renee, I said, standing up from the heavy mahogany table. I built it with my own 2 hands. I am not running from a thief in my own home. I will get the documents and I will be gone before he ever pulls into the driveway. Tyrone packed up his laptop, his expression grim. I will keep monitoring the trust, Isaiah. But you need to understand the velocity of this situation. When a man owes $500,000 to the mob, the timeline does not move in days. It moves in minutes. If the syndicate decides to send someone to his house tonight to collect, Marcus will point them directly at you to buy himself time. I understand, I said, buttoning my suit jacket. Renee stood up, walking around the table to stand right in front of me. She handed me a sleek black business card with a single cell phone number printed on the front. This is Sergeant David Vance, she said, her voice dropping to a serious whisper. Atlanta Police Department Homicide Division. He is a good man, Isaiah. He does not play politics, and he hates corrupt lawyers more than I do. I'm calling him the second you walk out that door. Do not bring the police in yet, I warned, taking the card. We need the physical proof of the poison. We need the paper trail locked down. If Vance spooks Marcus too early, the mob will handle him before we ever get him in a courtroom, and I want my son to face a judge, not a street enforcer. I'm just putting Vance on standby, Renee insisted, crossing her arms. You go to your house, you get your documents, and you get out. Do not answer the door. Do not pick up the phone. If you are not sitting in a secure location by 6 o'clock, I am sending a squad car to your driveway. I nodded, slipping the business card into my pocket next to the silver flash drive. The weight of the truth felt incredibly heavy against my chest. I turned and walked out of the glass conference room, leaving the high-rise tower behind. The drive back to the suburbs felt like a slow march into enemy territory. The Atlanta traffic crawled every brake light, a reminder of the ticking clock. My son was hunting me. He needed my signature to save his own life, and he was willing to step over my dead body to get it. He thought I was weak, a grieving old man who would fold under pressure. He was about to find out exactly what kind of father he really had. The cul-de-sac in Cascade Heights was quiet, too quiet for a Thursday afternoon. The manicured lawns, the massive oak trees, the perfect brick facades all felt like a lie. I parked my old sedan in the driveway, keeping the engine running for a long moment, my eyes scanning the street. There were no strange cars parked along the curb, no sign of Marcus. I checked the gold watch on my wrist. 4:15. I had less than 3 hours before my son showed up to force my hand, before he tried to trap me in my own living room. I unlocked the heavy front door, stepping into the grand foyer. The house felt entirely different now, stripped of all its warmth. It was no longer a home, it was a crime scene waiting to be processed. The silence pressed heavily against my ears. I walked straight past the wide kitchen entrance, refusing to look at the exact spot on the tile floor where Brenda had taken her last breath. I went directly to my study at the back of the long hallway. The study smelled of old paper lemon polish and the leather chair Brenda bought me when I finally retired from construction. I knelt behind the heavy oak desk, pulling back the thick edge of the oriental rug to reveal the steel floor safe. I spun the dial, the mechanical clicks sounding like gunshots in the empty room. 3 to the left, 2 to the right, 1 to the left. The heavy metal door popped open with a heavy thud. I reached inside, pulling out the fireproof metal box, setting it firmly on the desk. I flipped the latch, sifting quickly through 30 years of our entire lives. The original deed to the house signed in 1992. The clean titles to the sedans. Our passports. I gathered them quickly, sliding them into a thick leather portfolio. As my hand reached for the very bottom of the dark box, my fingers brushed against a thick, crisp manila envelope. I did not recognize it at all. Brenda and I kept everything meticulously organized, labeled in clear folders, but this envelope was brand new, unmarked, hidden beneath the legitimate property deeds. I pulled it out, untying the thin red string closure. Inside was a thick stack of legal documents with the corporate logo of a massive national insurance carrier printed boldly across the top page. It was a supplemental life insurance policy. The insured party listed at the top was James Isaiah Mitchell. The payout amount, printed in heavy black ink, was $1.5 million. The issue date was March 12th, just one single month before Brenda was murdered in our kitchen. I flipped rapidly to the final page, my heart hammering a violent rhythm against my ribs. There, right on the bottom signature line, was my name. It was a very good forgery, but a man knows his own handwriting. The loops on the letter L were too tight, the slant of the M was far too aggressive. Marcus had practiced this carefully. He had forged my signature, taken out a massive quiet policy on my life, and named himself as the sole uncontested beneficiary. Tyrone was absolutely right. The trust account was not nearly enough to cover the $900,000 mob debt, and Marcus knew it from the start. He had engineered a massive insurance payout. Once the underground debt was paid in full, he would pocket the rest of the cash, walking away a millionaire while both his parents rested quietly in the ground. The general power of attorney he wanted me to sign tonight was just the very first step. It would give him the immediate legal cover to handle the insurance investigators right after I inevitably suffered a tragic, grief-driven accident in my empty house. I shoved the fake policy into my portfolio, zipping the leather tight. This document was the motive, the smoking gun that tied his financial ruin directly to my impending death. I had to get out of the house immediately. Renee had warned me not to linger, and my instincts were screaming that my time was already up. I grabbed my keys, turned off the study light, and walked quickly down the long hallway. I locked the heavy deadbolt behind me, stepping out into the suffocating humidity of the Atlanta afternoon. I walked briskly toward my sedan, my eyes scanning the empty street, checking the shadows between the houses. That is when I saw it. Tucked neatly under the windshield wiper of my car, fluttering slightly in the warm southern breeze, was a single piece of white-lined notebook paper. I stopped dead in my tracks, my hand hovering over the door handle. My house was set far back from the road, surrounded by tall privacy hedges. Someone had to walk right up my long driveway, right to my car to leave it there. I reached out carefully, pulling the paper from under the black rubber blade. It was folded once down the middle. I opened it, my eyes locking onto the frantic, messy handwriting. He knows the note read, "Run. Just 3 isolated words, but they hit me like a physical blow to the chest. Someone was watching the house. Someone knew exactly what Marcus had done to his mother, and they knew exactly what he was planning to do to me. The absolute panic Marcus had shown on the phone was not just about the local mob freezing Kendra's bank accounts. He knew I was moving pieces on the board. He knew I had found the glasses. A dark, heavy SUV suddenly turned the corner onto my quiet street, moving slowly, far too slowly for a residential neighborhood. The windows were tinted completely black, crawling past the manicured lawns. I did not wait to see who was sitting inside. I threw the leather portfolio onto the passenger seat, slid quickly behind the wheel, and slammed the heavy car into gear. I floored the accelerator, the tires squealing sharply against the hot concrete, leaving my home behind in the rearview mirror as the SUV hit its brakes. I watched the dark SUV speed up in my rearview mirror, the aggressive grille closing the distance, but I knew the back roads of Cascade Heights better than anyone in the city. I took a hard right onto a narrow, tree-lined street, cutting the wheel sharply, the old sedan hugging the curves. I took a sudden left, blowing through a yellow light, weaving through the familiar neighborhood where I had built half the houses. I merged onto the interstate, pushing the engine to the absolute limit, losing the black-tinted vehicle in the heavy afternoon Atlanta traffic. I drove all the way to the northeast side to a cheap cash-only motel right off Buford Highway. It was the kind of place with peeling paint, a flickering neon sign, and a front desk clerk who did not ask for a real name and definitely did not care about your past. I paid for 2 nights in advance, using crisp bills, and parked my sedan in the back alley hidden from the main road. I walked up the exterior stairs and locked myself inside room number 11, pulling the heavy blackout curtains tightly shut. I sat on the edge of the lumpy mattress, my chest heaving, staring at the cheap wooden door. The forged life insurance policy was spread out on the thin, faded bedspread resting right next to the crumpled warning note. He knows, run. I kept running those 3 words through my mind, over and over again, listening to the hum of the broken ice machine outside. Who wrote it? I wondered, my hands shaking as the adrenaline slowly drained from my blood. Who else knew about the poison, and who knew that Marcus was hunting me? I reached into my pocket, pulled out the black business card Renee had given me, and dialed her direct line. She answered immediately, her voice sharp and focused. Get to the Buford Highway Motor Lodge. I told her, my voice low gravelly, in the quiet room. Room number 11. Renee, and bring the detective, because they just sent a car to my house and my time is completely up. An hour later, a heavy knock echoed through the small room. 2 sharp taps. A brief pause, then one more heavy strike against the wood. I looked through the scratched peephole. Renee was standing on the concrete walkway, looking completely out of place in her immaculate white suit. Right next to her was a tall, broad-shouldered man wearing a worn leather jacket, a dark button-down shirt, and a serious, unyielding scowl. I unbolted the locks, pulling the door open just enough to let them inside. Isaiah, Renee said, stepping quickly into the room and immediately locking the deadbolt behind her. This is Sergeant David Vance, Atlanta Police Department Homicide Division. Vance looked around the dingy, shadowed room, his dark eyes scanning the corners, checking the closed curtains before looking directly at me. Mr. Mitchell, he said, his voice deep and rough like gravel rolling over hard dirt. Renee told me you have a highly complicated family situation, but I'm going to be straight with you. I need to see the absolute proof before I step on a high-powered, politically connected lawyer like your son. I did not waste any time with small talk or pleasantries. I reached into my breast pocket, handed Vance the silver flash drive, and pointed to the small, scratched table by the window. Renee opened her laptop, the bright screen illuminating the dark room. We sat there with the neon sign buzzing faintly outside the glass, and we watched Brenda die all over again. Vance stood perfectly still, his massive arms crossed over his chest, his jaw locked tight, watching the footage. He watched Marcus pour the white pills into the bottle. He watched Brenda collapse onto the kitchen tile. When Marcus checked his expensive silver watch, waiting 12 agonizing minutes to call for help, Vance let out a slow, heavy, furious breath. "That is premeditated murder." Vance stated his professional detachment, breaking for just a single raw second. "He is a cold-blooded killer, Mr. Mitchell." I stood up, pulled the forged insurance policy off the faded bedspread and handed it directly to the detective. "And this is exactly why he did it," I explained, pointing my finger at the massive payout amount printed on the final page. $1.5 million forged with my signature, executed just 1 month before she died. Renee opened the complex financial spreadsheets Tyrone had prepared, turning the laptop toward Vance. "And this is the immediate motive," she added, tracing the $400,000 in stolen trust funds and detailing the massive underground gambling debt. "His wife owes almost $1 million to a South Atlanta syndicate, Vance, and they froze her accounts this morning." Vance picked up the crumpled note from my windshield. "He knows run." He read the 3 words aloud, turning the lined paper over in his large hands, analyzing the frantic handwriting. "Your son is backed into a very dark, very dangerous corner," Mr. Mitchell, Vance said, looking me right in the eye. "If the syndicate is involved, they do not care about his law degree, and they do not care about his excuses. They want their money, and Marcus needs you dead to get it. This is not just a homicide investigation anymore, Isaiah. This is an active, immediate threat to your life." I looked at the veteran detective, feeling the crushing weight of the situation, but refusing to let it break my spine. "I am not hiding in this cheap motel forever, Sergeant." I declared, my voice steady, filled with a father's righteous anger. "I want him stopped. I want him stripped of everything, and I want him to look me in the eye when the handcuffs go on." Vance nodded slowly, a cold, calculated determination settling over his weathered features. "We are going to stop him, Isaiah," he promised, slipping his notebook into his leather jacket. "But we are going to do it by the book, and we are going to need more than just this video to guarantee a conviction in front of a Fulton County jury. We need the physical, scientific evidence of the poison, and we need to move right now before he finds out where you are hiding." My phone vibrated against the cheap laminate of the motel table, breaking the heavy silence in the room. I looked down at the bright screen. It was a text message from an unknown Atlanta area code. "I wrote the note on your car," the message read. "I know what Marcus is planning to do. Meet me at the 24-hour diner on Ponce de Leon Avenue in 30 minutes. Come alone, or I will disappear entirely." I handed the phone to Vance. The detective read the glowing words, his jaw setting into a hard, unforgiving line. "You are not going to that meeting alone, Isaiah," he stated, pulling his heavy leather jacket on. "That diner is a fishbowl, but I can sit at the counter completely out of sight. We need to know who this is, and we need to know exactly what they know." The rain started falling hard as we drove into the city, washing the grit off the dark Atlanta streets. The diner was nearly empty, smelling heavily of stale coffee and old grease. I slid into a corner vinyl booth, facing the entrance, my hands resting flat on the cold table. Vance took a stool at the far end of the counter, nursing a black coffee, looking like just another tired truck driver seeking shelter from the storm. 10 minutes passed before the glass door finally opened. A woman walked in, looking nervously over her shoulder into the rainy night. She was maybe 40 years old, wearing a damp raincoat, clutching a worn leather purse tightly to her chest. She spotted me sitting in the corner, hesitated for a brief second, and then walked quickly over to my booth. She slid into the seat across from me, keeping her head down. "Are you Isaiah Mitchell?" she asked, her voice shaking, barely louder than the rain hitting the large window. "I am," I replied, keeping my tone gentle, trying not to spook her. "Who are you? And why did you leave that warning on my windshield? My name is Clarice," she whispered, her eyes darting anxiously toward the door. "I am a sponsor for a local gambling recovery group. Kendra is one of my people, Isaiah." She came to me 3 days ago, completely terrified, having a total mental breakdown. My chest tightened instantly at the mention of my daughter-in-law. What did Kendra tell you, Clarice? She told me everything Clarice said, a single tear slipping down her cheek. She told me about the $900,000 debt to the syndicate. She told me what Marcus did to your wife, how he used the potassium chloride to make it look exactly like a massive heart attack. I felt a cold rage burning in my stomach, but I kept my face perfectly still. Go on, I urged quietly. Clarice opened her purse, her hands trembling violently. She pulled out a small black digital voice recorder and slid it across the sticky table. Kendra told me Marcus was getting desperate. Clarice continued, her voice breaking. She said he hired a street cleaner from Mechanicsville, a violent man named Terrence, to handle you. Kendra could not live with another murder on her conscience, but she was too afraid to go to the police. So I followed Marcus yesterday afternoon to a dive bar down on Boulevard. I sat in the dark booth behind them and I recorded their meeting. I picked up the small device, pressing the play button. The audio was scratchy, filled with the background noise of a busy bar, but my son's voice cut through the static with chilling clarity. I need it done by tomorrow. Marcus ordered on the tape, sounding completely detached, like he was negotiating a simple business contract. He drives an old sedan. Cut the brake lines, Terrence. Leave just enough fluid in the master cylinder so they do not fail until he hits the high speeds on the interstate. Make it look like the old man just forgot his basic vehicle maintenance. A deep, rough voice chuckled on the recording. That is a messy job, Counselor, Terrence replied. Old men crash all the time, sure, but the syndicate wants their cut. It is going to cost you $50,000 up front in untraceable cash. You will have the money the second I see his car on the evening news, or Marcus snapped back. Just get it done. The recording clicked off, leaving only the sound of the heavy rain against the diner window. The dark SUV that followed me from my house, the heavy tinted windows, the slow crawl down my quiet street. It was Terrence. He was already hunting me, waiting for the perfect moment to slip under my car and guarantee my death. Clarice stood up quickly, pulling her damp coat tight around her shoulders. I cannot be involved in this anymore, Mr. Mitchell, she pleaded, her eyes wide with absolute terror. I did what my conscience demanded. I gave you the proof, but if Marcus or the syndicate finds out I helped you, they will kill me too. Please just stop him. She turned and practically ran out of the diner, disappearing into the dark, wet Atlanta night. I sat alone in the booth, staring at the small black recorder. A shadow fell over the table. Vance slid into the seat Clarice had just vacated, his dark eyes locked on the digital device. He had heard enough from the counter to know exactly what had just transpired. That is conspiracy to commit murder, Vance stated, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. He hired a hitman, Isaiah. He crossed the final line. Can we arrest him now? I asked, feeling the pure exhaustion settling deep into my bones. Vance shook his head, a grim determination setting onto his face. We could, but a smart defense lawyer will argue the audio is circumstantial or that Marcus was just blowing off steam. We need the ironclad scientific proof that he murdered your wife first. Once we prove the poison in Brenda's system, the financial motive and the hitman recording become an unbreakable chain of evidence. We are going to bury him so deep he will never see the sun again. How do we get the proof? I asked, looking out at the flashing neon sign. Vance pulled out his cell phone, his thumb resting over the screen. I am waking up a Fulton County judge right now, he said, dialing a number. I am getting an emergency order to exhume your wife's body, Isaiah. We are going to test her tissue for that chemical, and we are going to do it tomorrow morning before your son even realizes you are gone. The dawn broke over Atlanta, casting a cold gray light across Westview Cemetery. The heavy rain from the night before had finally stopped, leaving the manicured grass soaked and the air thick with southern humidity. I stood under the canopy of a massive, weeping willow, my hands shoved deep into the pockets of my dark wool coat. Sergeant Vance stood 30 feet away, speaking in low, clipped tones to the medical examiner and a team of forensic technicians. They were setting up a privacy tent over Brenda's grave, preparing to pull her casket from the earth. My chest ached with a deep, hollow pain, watching the men drive their shovels into the soft, wet ground. She deserved peace. She deserved a rest, but Marcus had robbed her of that, just like he had robbed her of her life. Vance walked over to me, his boots squishing softly in the wet grass. "You do not need to stay for this, Isaiah," he said quietly, his rough voice softening just a fraction. "It is a long, ugly process. We have the chain of custody secured, and the forensic pathologist is ready to run the tissue samples for potassium chloride the absolute second we arrive at the lab." I nodded, tearing my eyes away from the white privacy tent. Renee Carter was waiting for me in her sleek black town car, parked just outside the cemetery gates. Before I left the house yesterday, right after I found the forged insurance policy, I checked the small wooden box on Brenda's dresser. Inside, tucked beneath her favorite pearl necklace, was a small brass bank key. It had a numbered tag box, 447. I had no idea what it opened, but Brenda never kept secrets from me, not until the very end. I walked to the town car, climbing into the warm leather interior. Renee was already on her phone, firing off rapid instructions to her paralegals, freezing every single legitimate asset attached to my name. She ended the call as I shut the heavy door. "Where to, Isaiah?" she asked, looking at my exhausted face. "First National Bank on Peachtree Street," I replied, pulling the small brass key from my pocket. Brenda left this behind. I think she knew Marcus would try to destroy the physical evidence, so she locked her final moves in a vault. The drive into downtown Atlanta was silent. We pulled up to the massive stone facade of the bank just as the doors opened for the morning. The branch manager, a tall man in a sharp gray suit, recognized Renee immediately. He did not ask any unnecessary questions. He simply checked my identification, examined the brass key, and led us down the marble stairs into the subterranean vault. The heavy steel door clanged shut behind us, echoing in the quiet, climate-controlled room. The manager unlocked the master cylinder. I turned Brenda's brass key, and he pulled the long metal drawer from the wall. He set it carefully on a private viewing table and stepped out of the room, leaving Renee and me completely alone. I opened the metal lid, my hands shaking slightly. Inside, lying perfectly flat, were 3 items. A thick white envelope with my name written in Brenda's elegant cursive handwriting. A blue-bound legal folder, and a small black digital voice recorder identical to the one Clarice had used. I picked up the envelope first, breaking the wax seal. Inside were 5 pages of heavy stationery paper. My vision blurred as I recognized her perfect script, the ink still looking fresh. "My dearest Isaiah," the letter began. "If you are reading this, then my worst fears have come true and I am already gone. Please, my love, forgive my silence. I wanted to tell you everything, but you love Marcus so much, you are so incredibly proud of him. I could not bear to be the one to break your heart." I took a slow, heavy breath, blinking back the tears, and continued reading. "I found the missing trust money in March," Brenda wrote. $420,000 drained right out of our family legacy. I followed the paper trail, Isaiah. Kendra is in terrible trouble with violent people and Marcus is stealing from us to keep her alive. When I confronted him, when I threatened to go to the police, I saw something dark and completely terrifying in our son's eyes. Renee leaned over the table, her legal mind processing every single word. She documented the motive. Renee whispered, her eyes wide. She built the foundation for the homicide case before he even struck. I read the next paragraph, my hands gripping the paper tight. I took precautions, Isaiah. I had Andre install a camera in my reading glasses so you would have the absolute proof if Marcus made a move against me. But I also made sure he would never profit from my death. Look at the blue folder, my love. I went to a new lawyer and I completely rewrote my last will and testament. Renee immediately reached into the metal box, pulling out the blue legal folder. She flipped it open, scanning the dense legal jargon with expert speed. She disinherited him, Isaiah Renee stated, her voice ringing with absolute triumph. She left Marcus a token amount, just $10,000, which legally prevents him from contesting the document. She left 95% of her entire estate to the Atlanta Elder Justice Foundation. He killed her for the money, I said, the bitter reality burning in my chest. And she made absolutely sure he would not get a single bloody dime. I picked up the final item from the box, the small digital voice recorder. I pressed the play button, setting it gently on the metal table. Brenda's voice filled the quiet underground vault, sounding so clear, so incredibly alive, it made my heart physically ache. Isaiah, her recorded voice said, trembling with a fear she had hidden from me for weeks. Marcus thinks I have the original copy of the old will in my desk. He thinks that when I die, he will just slide the old paperwork through probate and take control of everything. He does not know about this vault. He does not know about the new will. The recording paused, the sound of her taking a ragged, terrified breath echoing in the small room. But he is desperate, Isaiah. She continued, her voice dropping to a serious, urgent whisper. The mob is threatening Kendra, and they will not stop. If I am gone, Marcus will immediately come for you. He will try to force you to sign over your rights, or he will engineer a tragic accident to claim the insurance money. You must not confront him alone, my love. He is not the boy we raised anymore. He is a monster, and he will kill you to save himself. Please, Isaiah. Take this evidence, go to the police, and run. I love you forever. The recording clicked off, plunging the vault back into heavy silence. Brenda had fought him right up to the very last second. She had faced down her own murder, gathering the weapons, drafting the legal shields, and leaving me a perfect, unbreakable map to destroy him. Renee carefully packed the new will, the letter, and the recorder into her leather briefcase. We have it all, Isaiah, she said, her voice filled with a cold, righteous certainty. The motive, the trap, the financial blockade. We just need Vance to call us with the forensic results, and we can lock your son in a cage for the rest of his miserable life. We walked out of the bank, stepping back into the bright Atlanta morning. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Sergeant Vance. I answered immediately, pressing the phone to my ear. Isaiah Vance said, the background noise of a busy laboratory echoing behind him. The pathologist expedited the tissue samples. It is positive. The concentration of potassium chloride in her heart muscle is massive. It was not a heart attack, Mr. Mitchell. It was a lethal, calculated dose of poison. Are you issuing the arrest warrant? I asked, watching the city traffic rush by. We have a major problem, Vance replied, his voice tightening with sudden urgency. Marcus is not at his law firm, and he is not at his house. My officers just reported a disturbance at the downtown police precinct. Your son just walked into the lobby, and he brought a private, high-priced psychiatrist with him. He is filing an emergency petition to have you declared legally incompetent, Isaiah. He is claiming you have severe dementia, and he is demanding the police help him track you down for a mandatory psychiatric hold. He is making his move, I said, feeling a cold, hard calm wash over me. He thinks I'm running because I'm confused. We need to shut this down right now, Vance ordered. Get to the precinct, Isaiah. Do not let him dictate the narrative. We are going straight there to meet you, and we are bringing the forensic report. I ended the call looking at Renee. He's at the downtown precinct, I told her, my voice hard as stone. He's trying to declare me legally insane so he can seize the assets right now. Renee's eyes flashed with absolute legal fury. Let him try, she snapped, unlocking the town car. We are going to walk right into that precinct, and we are going to drop the hammer on his entire life. The automatic doors of the downtown Atlanta police precinct slid open, hitting me with a blast of overly air-conditioned air. The lobby was loud, chaotic, filled with officers and civilians, but my eyes locked immediately on the front desk. Marcus stood there looking like the perfect concerned son. He wore a sharp navy suit, his posture tight with fake anxiety. Next to him stood a man I did not recognize, an older gentleman in a tweed jacket carrying a thick leather briefcase. Dad Marcus called out, his voice echoing across the tiled floor, dripping with a manufactured relief that made my stomach turn. He rushed toward me, reaching out as if to embrace me, but I stepped back, letting the cold distance between us speak for itself. "Thank God you are safe," Marcus continued, letting his hands drop, playing to the officers watching us from the desk. "You have been missing for 24 hours, Dad. We have been terrified. You are not thinking clearly, you are completely disoriented, and we need to get you some help." "I am thinking perfectly clearly," I said, my voice low, carrying a weight that stopped him dead in his tracks. "I know exactly where I am, Marcus, and I know exactly who you are." The older man in the tweed jacket stepped forward, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses, looking at me with a practiced clinical sympathy. "Mr. Mitchell," he said, his tone soft, condescending. "My name is Dr. Nathan Pierce. Your son asked me to come here today. He is deeply concerned about your mental decline since your wife passed away. You are exhibiting severe paranoia, and we believe you need a mandatory 72-hour psychiatric evaluation for your own safety." He held up a stack of official-looking medical forms, the very papers that would strip away my legal rights, the exact documents Marcus needed to seize the estate and pay off his mob debts. "Put those papers away," Dr. Renee Carter commanded, stepping smoothly out from behind me, her pristine white suit commanding immediate authority in the crowded room. "My client is under the direct legal protection of my firm, and he is of completely sound mind. If you attempt to file a fraudulent psychiatric hold, I will personally see to it that you lose your medical license before the sun sets today." Marcus looked at Renee, his eyes narrowing, his calculating mind racing to adjust his strategy. "Renee Carter," he said, his voice dropping the fake warmth, turning sharp and defensive. "This is a private family medical matter, counselor. My father is not well. He is having delusions about my mother. He is hiding important financial documents, and he needs immediate hospitalization." "He is not having delusions," a deep, rough voice interrupted. Sergeant David Vance walked through the double doors leading to the detective bureau, his heavy boots echoing on the tile. He held a sealed manila folder in his massive right hand. He walked straight up to Marcus, his face carved out of solid stone, radiating an intense, undeniable authority. "Your father is a key witness in an active, ongoing homicide investigation," Counselor Vance stated, his dark eyes boring directly into my son. "And anyone who attempts to interfere with his freedom or his testimony will be arrested for obstruction of justice right here in this lobby." Marcus went completely rigid. "A homicide investigation," he repeated, forcing a nervous, dismissive laugh. "That is absolutely insane." "My mother had a massive heart attack, Sergeant. The medical examiner ruled it natural causes 5 months ago. You are out of your jurisdiction." I stepped forward, closing the distance between me and the boy I used to carry on my shoulders. I looked deep into his eyes, looking for any trace of a soul, finding absolutely nothing but panic and raw, desperate greed. "We opened her grave this morning, Marcus," I said softly, my words slicing through his lies like a razor. The color completely drained from his face. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. He stared at me, the polished, arrogant lawyer facade, cracking, shattering into a million pieces right there on the precinct floor. "We pulled her casket from the earth at dawn." I continued, my voice steady, rhythmic, demanding his full attention. "The forensic pathologist took the tissue samples from her heart. They are running the tests right now, Marcus. They are looking for the exact chemical you poured into her vitamin bottle on April 14th. They are looking for the potassium chloride." Dr. Pierce took a sudden, panicked step backward, clutching his leather briefcase tightly to his chest. He looked at Marcus with wide, terrified eyes, realizing he had just stepped into the middle of a murder investigation. He did not say a single word. He just turned and walked quickly toward the exit, abandoning his wealthy client to save his own career and avoid the impending legal explosion. Marcus did not even try to stop the doctor. He was completely trapped, paralyzed by the sheer, overwhelming reality of his failure. You thought she did not know, I said, leaning in closer, using the context of her brilliant trap as a weapon to completely break his spirit. You thought she was just a quiet, obedient woman. But Brenda knew you were stealing the $400,000 from the trust. She knew about Kendra and the underground casino. She went to a new lawyer, Marcus. She completely changed her will. She left you $10,000 and she gave the entire estate to an elder abuse charity. No. Marcus whispered, shaking his head, his breathing turning shallow, frantic. No, the original will is in her desk. The original will was legally revoked, Renee stated coldly, twisting the legal knife deep into his chest. The new ironclad document is sitting in my office safe. You have absolutely no access to the trust. You have no access to your father's personal accounts, and your fraudulent life insurance policy has been reported to the State Fraud Division. You are completely bankrupt, Marcus, and the syndicate is going to collect their $900,000 very, very soon. He looked wildly around the lobby, looking at the uniformed officers, looking at Sergeant Vance, finally looking back at me. The trap had closed. His legal maneuvers were entirely useless. The clock was ticking down the final hours of his freedom and his life. We will have the final toxicology report by tomorrow morning, Vance promised, tapping the sealed folder against his palm. When that paper confirms the poison, I'm coming to your law firm, counselor, and I'm putting you in handcuffs. Do not leave the city. Marcus did not argue. He did not yell or try to defend his innocence. The desperate, cornered animal inside him realized the walls had completely caved in. He turned his back on me, his shoulders slumped, and walked out of the automatic doors into the sweltering Atlanta heat rushing toward his expensive car. He was out of time, out of money, and completely out of legal options. He is going to run, Renee warned, watching him speed out of the precinct parking lot. No, I said, feeling a dark, heavy certainty settling deep in my gut. He cannot run, Renee. The mob has Kendra's accounts frozen. They are watching his house. If he tries to flee Atlanta without paying that debt, they will kill his family. He has one final desperate play left to make, and he is going to make it tonight. The heavy glass doors of the downtown precinct closed behind us, blocking out the sweltering, unforgiving Atlanta heat. Sergeant Vance led Renee and me down a narrow cinder-block hallway, walking deep into the secure detective bureau. We needed a quiet room to process the morning, to plan the absolute final strike against my son. As we stepped into a small, windowless interrogation room, Vance felt his cell phone vibrate violently against his heavy leather jacket. He pulled the device out, checking the caller identification, his dark eyes narrowing immediately into a sharp, focused slit. "It is my dispatch," Vance said, holding the phone tightly to his ear. "Go ahead," he ordered, his deep voice echoing slightly against the bare walls. He listened for a long, tense moment, his jaw tightening, his massive shoulders going completely rigid. "Where is she right now?" he demanded, grabbing a silver pen from his shirt pocket. "Bring her directly to Safe House Alpha. Do not take her anywhere near her home, and do not let her make a single phone call." Vance ended the connection, looking at me with a grim, heavy expression. "That was the patrol unit covering the northern suburbs, Isaiah," he stated, sliding the phone slowly back into his pocket. "Kendra just ran out of her massive estate completely hysterical and threw herself right at the first marked police cruiser she could find. She is completely cracked under the pressure of the debt." We drove immediately to an unmarked brick building on the industrial side of the city, a secure location used specifically to protect high-value witnesses from the violent Atlanta street gangs. Kendra was sitting alone at a cold metal table wrapped tightly in a thick gray blanket, shaking violently under the harsh fluorescent lights. Her perfect country club facade was entirely gone. She looked hollow, broken, completely destroyed by the very greed she had married into. When I walked into the secure room, she looked up, her eyes wide with absolute terror. "I am so sorry, Isaiah," she sobbed, burying her pale face in her trembling hands. "I swear to God, I never wanted Brenda to die. I never wanted any of this terrible nightmare to happen." Renee Carter did not offer any comfort, standing coldly by the heavy metal door, acting as the ultimate legal predator. "You are facing accessory to murder right now, Kendra." Renee warned, her voice slicing cleanly through the crying. "If you want any leniency whatsoever from the district attorney, you need to tell us exactly what Marcus is planning to do today." Kendra took a ragged, desperate breath, wiping the hot tears from her face. "The syndicate came to the house just an hour ago," she whispered, her voice shaking with pure, unadulterated fear. "They parked a dark sports utility vehicle right in our driveway, and they told Marcus he had until midnight to pay the $900,000 or they were going to take my children away forever." Marcus completely lost his mind, Isaiah. He started tearing the master bedroom apart, packing a black duffel bag with medical supplies from his private kit. What kind of medical supplies? Vance demanded, stepping much closer to the metal table, his tactical mind engaging fully. "Syringes," Kendra answered, looking down at her trembling hands, unable to meet my gaze. "And a massive bottle of strong prescription sleeping pills. He said the psychiatric hold was a total failure and that he was completely out of time. He knows the police are waiting for the toxicology report tomorrow morning. He knows he is going to prison for the rest of his life unless he gets the insurance money paid out tonight." "How is he planning to get it?" I asked, my voice deadly calm, staring directly at the woman who had helped plot my death. "He's going to break into your house tonight," Kendra confessed, looking at me with total, undeniable despair. "He still has the spare key from last year, the one Brenda gave him for emergencies. He's going to wait until it is completely dark, slip inside the back door, and force you to swallow the pills. If you fight him, he is going to use the syringe to inject you with a massive dose of air, causing a sudden, untraceable stroke." "And then what is the next step?" Renee asked, documenting every single horrifying word on her yellow legal pad. "Then he is going to stage the entire scene." Kendra sobbed, clutching the gray blanket even tighter around her shaking shoulders. "He practiced forging a suicide note all morning in his office. He's going to leave it right on your desk, saying you simply could not live without Brenda, that the grief finally drove you to take your own life. He figures that with a signed suicide note and a house locked perfectly from the inside, the local police will just close the case and the life insurance company will issue an expedited payout to him as the sole surviving heir." The windowless room went completely silent, the absolute horror of his desperate plan hanging heavy in the stale, cold air. My own son was coming to my home tonight, carrying the tools of my execution in a black duffel bag, planning to murder me in cold blood and forge my final words just to save his own miserable life. He was trading my continued existence for a massive payout from a fake insurance policy, a policy that Renee had already completely frozen, a policy that would never actually pay him a single dime. Vance looked at me, a dangerous, tactical fire burning bright in his dark eyes. "He is walking right into a massive trap," Isaiah, the veteran detective, stated, his rough voice filled with absolute, unwavering conviction. "He thinks you are just a helpless, grieving old man sitting completely alone in the dark. He does not know we have his wife confessing in a secure room. He does not know we have the fake policy locked down. And he definitely does not know I am going to have a heavy tactical strike team surrounding your entire property tonight." We left the cinderblock safe house behind us, stepping out into the fading Atlanta sun. The suffocating heat of the day was finally breaking, giving way to a heavy, humid evening. Sergeant Vance did not waste a single second. He made 3 rapid phone calls from the passenger seat of Renee Carter's town car, mobilizing a highly specialized covert tactical unit. We were heading straight back to Cascade Heights, back to the very house where my wife was murdered, to lay the ultimate trap for my only son. When we arrived at my quiet suburban street, the sun had completely dipped below the tree line, plunging the neighborhood into deep purple shadows. Vance directed the driver to park 2 blocks away, completely out of sight from my front door. We stepped out into the humid air, walking quietly toward the back of a large, unmarked command van parked near the neighborhood park. The heavy metal doors swung open, revealing a bank of glowing monitors and 4 tactical officers dressed in completely black unmarked gear. Vance introduced me to his lead technical specialist, a young, focused officer who immediately handed me a fresh dress shirt. "Take off your jacket." "Isaiah," the young tech instructed, his voice low and professional. "We need to wire you for perfect high-definition audio because we have to capture every single word of his confession before we move in." I unbuttoned my collar, my hands steady, feeling a deep, righteous calm settling into my bones. The tech taped a tiny flat microphone directly to my chest, securing it tightly against my skin, running an invisible wire down my side. He handed me a small flat device no larger than a standard house key. "This is your panic button," Isaiah Vance explained, stepping closer, his massive presence filling the tight space of the command van. "We are slipping this right inside your right shoe, directly under your heel. If Marcus makes a sudden move, if he pulls that syringe, or if you feel your life is in immediate, unavoidable danger, you press your heel down hard 3 times in a row. 3 strikes, and my tactical team will blow the hinges off your front door in under 5 seconds. I slid the small device into my leather shoe, testing the pressure against my heel. It felt heavy, a physical reminder that I was about to look the devil right in the eye. "Are you absolutely sure you want to do this?" Renee asked, standing near the back doors of the van, her usually cold legal demeanor cracking with genuine concern. "We can just arrest him the second he steps onto your property, Isaiah. We do not have to let him inside the house. You do not have to sit in the dark with a murderer." I looked at the brilliant lawyer, appreciating her protection, but knowing my path was already set. "If we arrest him on the porch, he will claim he was just coming to check on his sick father," I said, my voice resonating with absolute, unwavering certainty. "He will use his law degree to twist the narrative, and he will drag Brenda's name through years of painful appeals. I want him in the living room, Renee. I want him to look at me believing he has completely won, and I want him to confess to everything he did. I am doing this for my wife." Vance nodded slowly, a deep respect shining in his dark veteran eyes. He turned to the tactical officers, his voice dropping into a hard, commanding bark. "You heard the man," Vance ordered. "Secure the perimeter, completely dark, zero radio chatter. I want 2 men in the backyard hedges, 2 men covering the front porch blind spots, and a breach team stacked on the side garage door. If the target arrives with the street cleaner, Terrence, you take the hitman down silently on the lawn. Nobody breathes heavy until the target is completely inside and the doors locked behind him." The officers moved out like silent shadows, disappearing into the dark Atlanta night, blending perfectly into the manicured lawns and heavy oak trees of my neighborhood. Vance placed a heavy, reassuring hand on my shoulder. "I will be listening to every single breath you take," Isaiah the sergeant promised. "You are not alone in that house tonight." I walked the final 2 blocks by myself, the humid night air clinging to my clothes. The streetlights flickered on, casting long yellow pools of light across the concrete. My house stood at the end of the cul-de-sac, dark, silent, and entirely empty. It looked like a tomb, a perfect stage for a grieving widower to finally give up on life. That was exactly what Marcus needed to see. I unlocked the heavy front door, stepping into the grand foyer. I did not turn on the main hallway lights. I walked slowly through the dark, silent house, feeling the memories of 38 years pressing against the walls. I moved past the kitchen, avoiding the tile floor, and walked straight into the large, sunken living room. I turned on one single dim reading lamp next to my favorite leather armchair, casting a weak, solitary circle of light in the massive, dark room. I sat down heavily in the chair, resting my hands on the worn leather armrests. I positioned my right foot, carefully feeling the hard plastic of the panic button resting directly beneath my heel. The digital clock on the mantel glowed a bright, bloody red in the dark. 8:15 in the evening. The trap was perfectly set. The perimeter was entirely locked down. I leaned my head back, closing my eyes, and I waited in the deafening silence for my son to come and end my life. The digital clock on the mantel glowed a bright bloody red, reading 10:15, then 10:30. The house settled in the dark, the wooden beams groaning softly in the heavy, humid night. I kept my breathing slow, rhythmic, knowing Sergeant Vance and his tactical team were listening to every single inhale through the wire taped securely to my chest. I sat perfectly still in the leather armchair, my right heel hovering just a fraction of an inch above the small plastic panic button hidden in my shoe. At exactly 10:45, I finally heard the noise. It was not the heavy front door. It was the subtle metallic scratch of a key sliding into the brass deadbolt on the back patio entrance. The lock clicked open, the sound echoing sharply down the long, dark hallway of my home. Soft, deliberate footsteps moved across the kitchen tile, carefully avoiding the exact spot where Brenda had fallen. Marcus stepped slowly into the dim circle of lamplight in the sunken living room. He was dressed entirely in black, wearing a dark hooded sweatshirt, dark jeans, and thin medical-grade latex gloves. He carried a heavy black canvas duffel bag slung securely over his right shoulder. He froze instantly when he saw me sitting in the leather armchair. He clearly expected to find me asleep in the master bedroom, vulnerable, confused, and completely unaware of his presence. Daddy said, his voice a harsh, startled whisper in the quiet room, "What are you doing sitting in the dark?" I leaned forward slightly, letting my shoulders slump heavily, playing the part of a broken, senile old man who had completely lost his grip on reality. "I'm just waiting for your mother to come home," I replied, making my voice sound weak, fragile, lost in the past. "She said she would be right back from the grocery store." Marcus stared at me for a long, heavy second, his eyes scanning my face in the dim light. Then he let out a slow, cruel breath, his tense shoulders dropping in profound relief. He realized I was not a physical threat, just a pathetic, grieving widower slowly losing his mind. "Mom is not coming back. Dad," he said, his voice entirely devoid of any warmth, any hesitation, any love. "And neither are you." He walked confidently over to the heavy oak coffee table, setting the black duffel bag down right in front of my knees. He unzipped the canvas, the sound loud and violent in the silent room. He reached his gloved hand inside, pulling out a large amber prescription bottle. He set it heavily on the wood. Then he reached back into the bag, pulling out a long, clear plastic syringe, the sharp steel needle glinting maliciously in the weak lamplight. Finally, he reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a single folded sheet of crisp white paper. He unfolded it carefully, smoothing the creases flat, and laid it on the table right next to the lethal tools. "I wrote this for you this morning." Marcus explained, his tone perfectly conversational, like he was presenting a simple legal contract in a downtown boardroom. "It is your suicide note, Dad. It explains that you simply could not bear the heavy, crushing grief of losing Mom, that your mind was completely slipping away and you desperately needed to be at peace with her. I studied your old architectural blueprints for hours. I copied your angular handwriting perfectly. The local police will find it, they will see the empty pill bottle, and they will close the tragic case before the sun even comes up." I looked at the forged letter, feeling the cold plastic of the panic button resting directly under my foot. The silence outside the house was absolute. I knew Sergeant Vance was out there sitting in the dark command van recording every single word of this twisted, arrogant confession. "Why are you doing this to me, Marcus?" I asked, letting my hands tremble visibly against the leather armrests, making sure the hidden microphone picked up every single syllable. "I am your father. I built this house for you. I gave you everything I had in this world." "You gave me a comfortable, boring life," Marcus corrected, picking up the bottle of pills and twisting the white child-proof cap off with a sharp snap. But Kendra gave me a $900,000 debt to the most violent people in Atlanta. The underground syndicate froze her bank accounts this morning, Dad. They parked a heavy truck right in my driveway, and they gave me until midnight tonight to pay them in absolute full, or they are going to take my children away forever. He poured a massive handful of the small white pills into his gloved palm, the chalky sound filling the tense space between us. I need the $1.5 million from the life insurance policy, Marcus continued, stepping around the coffee table, invading my personal space. I need it right now, tonight, to save my own family. I do not have a life insurance policy, I whispered, staring up at the monster I no longer recognized, feeding him the exact lines to completely incriminate himself on the wire. I know you do not. Marcus laughed, a cold, hollow sound that chilled the sweat on my neck. I forged your signature back in March, right before I handled Mom. It was my brilliant backup plan, just in case the family trust money was not enough to clear the massive debt. And thank God I did, because you refused to sign the power of attorney today. You went to the police precinct, you tried to fight me, you forced my hand. This is entirely your fault, Dad. What about the man in the dark vehicle, I asked, keeping my voice weak, terrified. The man who followed me to the motel today. Terrence Marcus smirked, shaking his head in absolute disgust. You saw him. He was supposed to cut your brake lines, make you crash cleanly on the interstate, but you ran to that cheap motel you hid from him. You cost me $50,000, Dad. So I had to come here and do it myself, just like I had to do it for Mom. He held his gloved hand out toward me, the white pills resting heavily in his palm. You have a very simple choice to make right now, he ordered, looking down at me with absolute towering contempt. You can swallow these pills, fall asleep peacefully in your favorite chair and never wake up, or I can use that syringe to inject a massive air bubble directly into your bloodstream. It will cause a sudden catastrophic stroke. It will be incredibly painful, and it will leave absolutely no chemical trace for the medical examiner to find. Either way, you are taking your very last breath in this room tonight. I looked at the handful of white pills, then up at the monster standing over me. Why did it have to be your mother, Marcus? I asked, letting a single tear fall down my cheek, playing the broken man perfectly. We could have helped you. We could have paid the syndicate together. Marcus scoffed, a vicious, ugly sound that echoed in the quiet house. You would never pay a gambling debt for Kendra, Dad. You and Mom were too completely self-righteous for that, and Mom found the missing $400,000 from the family trust. She traced the wire transfers to the shell companies, she gathered the bank statements, and she told me she was going straight to the police. She gave me no choice, Dad. She was going to ruin my entire career, put me in prison, and let the mob murder my family. So you poured the potassium chloride into her daily vitamins, I said, repeating the specific chemical name, clearly ensuring Sergeant Vance heard every single syllable through the hidden microphone. You planned it in advance. It was the perfect plan, Marcus bragged, stepping closer, looming over my leather armchair. Potassium chloride is untraceable unless a medical examiner specifically tests for it, and nobody looks closely at a 68-year-old woman with a history of high blood pressure. I swapped the pills in the morning. I waited for her to take them that night. I stood right there in the kitchen and I watched her fall to the tile floor. I checked my watch, Dad. I waited 12 full minutes, just listening to her gasp for air, making absolutely sure she was gone before I picked up the phone to call 911. It was necessary. It was purely business. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. Hearing him say it out loud, hearing the absolute lack of remorse in his voice completely killed whatever lingering shred of fatherly love I had left. My posture changed. I stopped trembling. I sat up perfectly straight in the heavy leather chair, planting my right foot firmly on the floor. You are completely wrong, Marcus, I said, my voice suddenly deep, steady, and ringing with absolute undeniable authority. It was not a perfect plan at all. Marcus froze, his eyes narrowing, sensing the sudden shift in the room. The fragile, broken old man was completely gone, replaced by a father who had just secured his son's absolute destruction. "What are you talking about?" Marcus demanded, his voice dropping into a dangerous warning tone. "Take the pills right now. We are completely out of time. She knew you were stealing from us, Marcus." I continued, ignoring his command, staring right through his expensive dark clothing. "She knew you were capable of extreme violence. So she went to see Andre at the optical shop down in Sweet Auburn. She had him install a high-definition micro camera directly into the frame of her daily reading glasses." Marcus stepped back, his mouth opening slightly, his arrogant mask slipping. The glasses, he whispered, his eyes darting toward the dark hallway, his mind racing through the events of that night. "Yes, Marcus," I confirmed, my voice a heavy righteous hammer falling right on his chest. "She left them sitting right on the kitchen island. She recorded you pouring the poison into her vitamin bottle. She recorded your panicked phone call with Kendra discussing the massive mob debt. And she recorded you standing over her body, checking your expensive silver watch, waiting 12 minutes for her to die. I found the broken glasses yesterday, son. I watched the videos. I watched you murder my wife." The absolute terrifying realization hit Marcus like a physical blow. His eyes went incredibly wide, his chest heaving as the panic finally consumed him. He looked at me sitting so calmly in the chair, not fighting, not running, just talking. He looked at my chest. He realized I was not just confessing my knowledge, I was broadcasting his entirely. "You are wearing a wire," Marcus screamed, a raw, animalistic sound of pure, unadulterated panic. He lunged forward, dropping the handful of white pills, closing the distance between us in a single violent stride. He grabbed the collar of my dress shirt with both of his gloved hands, yanking me violently upward, ripping the fabric straight down the middle. The buttons popped, scattering across the wooden floor like tiny gunshots. He saw the flat, black microphone taped tightly to my skin, the thin wire running down my side. "You set me up, you old fool," he roared, his face twisting into a mask of pure homicidal rage. He ripped the microphone violently from my chest, tearing the tape and the skin, throwing the device onto the hardwood floor. He brought his heavy boot down, crushing the electronic transmitter into a dozen broken, useless plastic pieces. The audio feed to Sergeant Vance was completely dead. We were entirely alone in the dark house. Marcus spun around, grabbing the clear plastic syringe from the coffee table, ripping the protective cap off the long steel needle with his teeth. He turned back to me, his eyes wide, wild, completely disconnected from reality. "They might have the recording, Dad," Marcus hissed, advancing on me with the lethal syringe raised high in the dim lamplight. "But they are parked down the street. They cannot save you in time. I am going to inject this air directly into your neck. I'm going to watch you stroke out, and I'm going to burn this entire house straight to the ground with you inside it. The mob is not going to kill my family because of your self-righteous trap." He lunged at me again, grabbing my left shoulder, pinning me hard against the back of the heavy leather armchair. He raised the sharp steel needle, aiming directly for the thick, pulsing vein in my neck. I did not fight his grip. I did not try to block his arm. I simply pressed my right heel down hard against the sole of my shoe. 1, 2, 3. I struck the hidden plastic panic button 3 times in rapid, heavy succession, sending the silent emergency breach signal directly to the heavily armed tactical team waiting in the absolute darkness outside my home. The front door of my house did not just open, it completely exploded. Splinters of heavy oak and shattered brass flew across the grand foyer, raining down on the hardwood floor like dangerous shrapnel. Before Marcus could even register the deafening crash, before he could push that lethal steel needle into my neck, the dark living room was flooded with blinding, piercing tactical lights. "Atlanta police, drop the weapon right now," a voice roared from the hallway, booming with absolute, undeniable authority. 4 officers dressed in heavy black tactical gear swarmed into the sunken living room, moving with terrifying speed and precision. Marcus froze in pure shock, his gloved hand trembling violently, the syringe hovering just an inch from my skin. He looked toward the blinding lights, his eyes wide, completely blinded by the heavy beams cutting through the dim lamplight. "Drop it now," the lead officer commanded again, raising his weapon directly at my son's chest. The arrogant, calculating lawyer finally realized he was completely surrounded. The heavy plastic syringe slipped from his trembling fingers, clattering uselessly onto the wooden coffee table. Before it even stopped rolling, 2 tactical officers hit Marcus with the force of a freight train. They tackled him hard to the floor, driving his face directly into the expensive Persian rug. He gasped for air, completely stunned, offering absolutely no physical resistance as they wrenched his arms firmly behind his back. The cold, heavy click of steel handcuffs echoed sharply in the room, finalizing his absolute ruin. I stayed seated in my leather armchair, smoothing down the torn fabric of my dress shirt, my breathing slow and steady. I watched them pull my son up to his knees. Sergeant David Vance walked slowly through the shattered front entryway, his massive boots crunching over the broken wood. He stepped into the living room, looking down at the broken man kneeling on my floor. Vance reached into his heavy leather jacket, pulling out a small black radio. "Perimeter secure," a voice crackled through the radio static. "We have the street cleaner Terrence completely neutralized on the side lawn. He was carrying a suppressed weapon and heavy wire cutters." Vance nodded, looking at me with a deep, silent respect before turning his dark, furious eyes directly onto Marcus. "You have the right to remain silent." Counselor Vance began his rough voice reciting the Miranda warning like a heavy iron judge delivering a death sentence. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Marcus knelt there, his expensive dark clothing covered in dust and rug fibers. He looked at me, his eyes completely hollow, the terrifying reality of his situation finally crushing his arrogant spirit. "You destroyed my entire life, Dad," Marcus whispered, his voice cracking a pathetic, broken sound that held absolutely no remorse for his murdered mother. "You sold out your own flesh and blood." I stood up from the leather chair, towering over the man who had planned to murder me just 60 seconds ago. "You destroyed yourself, Marcus," I said, my voice ringing with absolute final justice. "You destroyed yourself the minute you poured that poison into Brenda's vitamins. You traded your own soul for a gambling debt, and now you are going to pay the ultimate price. Take him out of my house, Sergeant," I ordered. Turning my back on the pathetic creature kneeling on the floor, I do not ever want to look at him again. The tactical officers hoisted Marcus roughly to his feet, dragging him toward the shattered front door. He did not struggle. He did not yell. He just let his head drop, walking out into the humid Atlanta night, surrounded by the flashing red and blue lights of a dozen police cruisers. Renee Carter stepped carefully through the broken entryway, looking at the scattered pills, the syringe, and the forged suicide note resting on the coffee table. She picked up the crisp white paper, reading the fake grief-stricken words Marcus had meticulously copied. "He really thought he could just forge his way out of murder," Renee said, shaking her head in absolute disgust. "He left us the physical blueprint of his premeditation, Isaiah. This note, the syringe, the recorded confession. He just handed the district attorney a flawless, unbreakable case." Vance walked back into the living room, holstering his heavy service weapon. "We have the hitman loaded into a secure transport van, Isaiah. Terrence is already cutting a deal offering to testify about the $50,000 contract just to save himself from a lethal injection. Between the street cleaner, the hidden camera videos, the toxicology report, and the wire recording your son is never breathing free air again." I looked around my quiet living room, finally feeling the heavy, suffocating weight lift from my chest. The house was a crime scene, now completely shattered, but it was finally clean. The evil that had poisoned my family was locked in the back of a police cruiser heading straight for a cold concrete cell. "Let us get to the precinct, Renee," I said, buttoning my suit jacket over my torn shirt. We have a mountain of evidence to process, and I want to make absolutely sure his bail is denied before the sun even comes up. The Fulton County Jail was supposed to be the end of the line, but money has a way of unlocking doors that justice tries to bolt shut. 7 days after the tactical team ripped my front door off its hinges, I was sitting in Renee Carter's high-rise office, staring out at the hazy Atlanta skyline. The morning rain was beating heavily against the thick glass, washing the smog away, but I still felt a deep, suffocating dirt clinging to my skin. Renee walked into the conference room, her heels clicking sharply against the polished marble floor. She dropped a thick stack of legal documents onto the mahogany table. Her face completely drained of color, her jaw locked tight. "Isaiah," she said, her voice dropping into a low, dangerous register. "The judge granted him bail this morning." I stood up slowly, planting my hands flat on the cold wood, staring directly into her dark, fierce eyes. "How is that even possible?" "Renee," I demanded, my voice rumbling with a heavy, righteous anger. "We have him on tape holding a syringe. We have the poison in Brenda's heart. We have the hitman sitting in a cell singing like a bird. He is a flight risk. He is a murderer, and he owes $1 million to the Atlanta mob." "The judge set the bond at $5 million, Renee explained, pulling out a chair and sitting down heavily. "We thought it was an insurmountable number considering we completely froze the family trust and flagged his bank accounts. But Marcus did not post the money, Isaiah. Kendra's estranged parents stepped in, and they leveraged their massive estate in Savannah to cover the entire bond." I shook my head, absolutely disgusted by the twisted loyalty of wealthy people. "Her parents despise Marcus," I stated, pacing slowly across the room. "They cut Kendra off 5 years ago because of her gambling addiction. Why would they put their generational wealth on the line for the man who put a target on their daughter's back?" "They are not doing it for him," Renee corrected, tapping a silver pen against the legal files. "They are doing it to protect their family name and to secure custody of their grandchildren. Kendra is currently sitting in a psychiatric facility completely broken, and the state was threatening to put the children into the foster system. Her parents bought his temporary freedom just to keep the state out of their private affairs. But Marcus is currently sitting in a luxury condo in Buckhead with a GPS monitor strapped tightly to his ankle." I looked out the window, picturing my son sitting on a plush leather sofa, drinking expensive scotch, while Brenda lay cold in the Georgia earth. It felt like a physical knife twisting deep in my gut. "He's not going to just sit there," I warned, turning back to the brilliant attorney. "He is a cornered rat, Renee. He's going to try to build a way out." "He already hired Arthur Sterling," Renee stated, dropping the final devastating piece of news onto the table. The name hit me like a solid punch to the jaw. Arthur Sterling was not just a defense attorney. He was an absolute legal magician, a man who made his fortune defending corrupt politicians and wealthy executives who were caught dead to rights. He did not care about the truth. He only cared about destroying the prosecution's narrative piece by bloody piece. "What is his angle?" I asked, sitting back down, bracing myself for the impending legal war. "He cannot argue self-defense, and he cannot deny the poison. We have the video from Brenda's glasses." "Sterling is not going to deny the events," Renee explained, sliding a preliminary legal motion across the table. "He is building a massive, complex insanity defense. He filed a motion this morning claiming Marcus suffered a severe, debilitating psychotic break due to the extreme, unmanageable stress of his wife's gambling debts and violent mob threats. An insanity defense," I repeated, feeling a bitter, hollow laugh rising in my chest. "He methodically researched lethal chemicals. He swapped pills in the morning. He waited 12 minutes for her to die, and he hired a professional hitman. That is not insanity, Renee. That is pure, calculated, cold-blooded premeditation." Sterling knows that Renee agreed, leaning forward, her eyes burning with a fierce competitive fire. "But he's going to parade a dozen highly paid, corrupt psychiatrists through that courtroom. They are going to testify that Marcus dissociated from reality, that he genuinely believed he was saving his family from absolute destruction, and that he could not distinguish right from wrong when he poisoned Brenda. He is trying to paint Marcus as a tragic victim of circumstance, a desperate father who simply lost his mind. And what about the fake suicide note? I countered, tapping my finger hard against the mahogany table. What about the syringe, the forged insurance policy, the power of attorney? Madmen do not file complex legal paperwork to steal millions of dollars. Sterling is already filing motions to suppress the audio from your wire, Renee warned, crossing her arms tightly. He is claiming entrapment, arguing that Sergeant Vance and the tactical team illegally coerced the confession by placing you in a situation designed to provoke a mental breakdown. It is a weak argument, but Sterling only needs to plant one single seed of doubt in the mind of one single juror to hang the entire trial. I stood up, walking back to the floor, to ceiling window, looking down at the massive, sprawling city. The rain continued to fall, but my vision was perfectly undeniably clear. Marcus thought he could buy his way out of hell. He thought a slick lawyer and a fake medical diagnosis could erase the absolute horror of what he did to his own mother. Let him build his fake insanity defense, I said, my voice echoing in the quiet, expensive room. Let Arthur Sterling bring his corrupt doctors. Let him try to twist the narrative. Let him try to paint my son as a victim. Because when I take that witness stand, Renee, I'm going to tear their entire story to absolute shreds. I'm going to make sure that jury sees the exact same monster I saw in my dark living room. We are going to trial Isaiah, Renee promised, standing up to join me by the glass. And we are going to bury him. I nodded, watching the traffic crawl far below. The dominoes were fully set, the trap was sprung, and now it was time for the final absolute ruin. The November wind cut sharply through my heavy wool coat as I walked up the wide concrete steps of the Fulton County Courthouse. The morning was entirely gray, the sky pressing down on the city like a heavy, suffocating blanket. Dozens of reporters swarmed the concrete plaza, their cameras flashing blindly, shouting questions about the prominent lawyer who murdered his own mother. Renee Carter flanked my right side, her presence a flawless, impenetrable shield, guiding me straight through the chaos without a single word. Courtroom 6B was a massive cavern of dark oak, polished brass, and heavy absolute silence. I walked down the center aisle, taking my seat in the front row of the gallery, resting my hands firmly on my knees. Marcus was already sitting at the defense table, positioned right next to Arthur Sterling. My son wore a loose-fitting gray suit, his hair slightly unkempt, his shoulders slumped dramatically forward. He was playing the role of a mentally broken, exhausted victim, perfectly manufactured entirely for the 12 strangers sitting in the jury box. He did not turn around. He did not look at me even once. Judge Helen Washington entered the courtroom, her black robe flowing, her expression carved out of solid stone. The bailiff called the room to order, the heavy wooden gavel striking the block, echoing like a gunshot. Assistant District Attorney Sarah Jenkins stood up for the prosecution. She was a brilliant, relentless force of nature, wearing a dark navy suit, completely unbothered by Sterling and his expensive, towering reputation. She walked slowly toward the jury box, making direct, piercing eye contact with every single juror before she finally spoke. Ladies and gentlemen, Jenkins began, her voice ringing clear, steady, and utterly devastating. This is not a case about a sudden tragedy or a fractured mind. This is a case about a man who systematically, carefully, and brutally traded his own parents' lives to cover a gambling debt. She did not pace. She just stood there laying out the massive, undeniable dominoes of his guilt. She told them about the $420,000 stolen meticulously from the family trust over 14 months. She told them about the $900,000 owed to a violent South Atlanta syndicate. She told them about the lethal, untraceable potassium chloride and the exact 12 minutes Marcus waited in the dark, watching his mother gasp for air on the kitchen floor. He did not stop with his mother. Jenkins continued turning her body, slightly pointing a steady finger directly at Marcus. When the money ran out, he forged a $1.5 million life insurance policy on his father. He hired a professional street assassin to cut his brakes, and when that failed, he walked into his father's living room carrying a syringe and a forged suicide note. This was not a break from reality, ladies and gentlemen. This was a calculated, cold-blooded financial transaction. Jenkins took her seat, leaving the jury completely stunned, the heavy reality of the evil settling firmly over the room. Arthur Sterling stood up slowly, pushing his chair back, his face a mask of profound manufactured sympathy. He walked to the wooden rail of the jury box, his voice smooth, dripping with expensive theatrical sorrow. Marcus Mitchell is a deeply tragic figure. Sterling countered, gripping the rail with both hands. He was crushed under the unimaginable, terrifying weight of organized crime. Violent men threatened to murder his wife. They threatened to kidnap his young children. Under that massive, inescapable pressure, his mind completely and totally snapped. Sterling looked back at Marcus, shaking his head sadly. He separated from reality. Sterling claimed, his voice dropping into a soft, pleading register. He did not act out of greed. He acted out of a profound, paralyzing, clinical insanity. He truly believed he was saving his family from absolute destruction, and he requires medical help, not a prison cell. Sarah Jenkins did not waste a single second dismantling that expensive lie. The absolute minute the defense finished their opening, she called her very first witness, starting the relentless avalanche of truth. Tyrone Woods took the stand, the forensic accountant adjusting his glasses, holding his thick financial ledgers. Jenkins walked him through the massive, complex spreadsheets, projecting the bank records onto a large screen for the jury to see. Tyrone showed them the exact, deliberate wire transfers, the hidden shell companies, the calculated embezzlement that started a full year before the murder. "Did you find any evidence of chaotic, disorganized financial behavior?" Jenkins asked, leaning against the prosecution table. "No." Tyrone answered, his voice strictly professional, echoing in the quiet room. "The embezzlement was executed with extreme precision. He kept every single transfer just under the banking alert threshold. It requires immense focus and complete legal awareness to launder money this cleanly. Madmen do not launder money with perfect precision," Jenkins stated loudly, submitting the massive financial ledgers into absolute evidence. Sterling objected, trying to disrupt her rhythm, but Judge Washington overruled him immediately. Then Jenkins called the street cleaner to the stand. Terrence walked through the heavy side doors wearing a bright orange county jumpsuit, his wrists shackled firmly in heavy steel chains. The hitman sat in the wooden witness box, completely unfazed by the grand courtroom, looking at the jury with dead, empty eyes. "Did the defendant appear insane or detached from reality when he hired you?" Jenkins asked, pacing slowly across the floor. Terrence let out a low, rough, incredibly cynical laugh. "No," the hitman replied, his heavy voice cutting right through the quiet room. He was completely calm. He negotiated the $50,000 price tag like he was just buying a used car. He told me exactly how to cut the brake lines, and he told me exactly what time the old man left the house. He was sharp, and he was completely focused on the cash. I watched the jury closely from the front row. I saw their faces harden, their postures stiffening. The accountant had just proven the undeniable greed, and the shackled hitman had just proven the absolute cold-blooded premeditation. Sterling tried to cross-examine Terrence, trying desperately to paint the hitman as a chronic liar, looking for a plea deal. But Jenkins simply requested to play the audio recording from the dark dive bar, playing my son's cold, negotiating voice right into the official court record, silencing the expensive defense attorney completely. The dominoes were falling rapidly now, crushing my son's desperate manufactured lies one by one, setting the perfect, undeniable stage for my own testimony. The bailiff called my name, his voice echoing in the heavy wood of the Fulton County courtroom. I stood up from the front row, smoothing my dark suit jacket, feeling the eyes of the jury tracking my every single step. I walked past the defense table, passing so close to Marcus. I could smell his expensive cologne, but I kept my eyes locked directly ahead. I stepped into the wooden witness box, raised my right hand, and swore to tell the absolute unvarnished truth. Sarah Jenkins approached the stand, her expression softening just a fraction, acknowledging the massive, unbearable weight resting on my shoulders. "Mr. Mitchell," she began gently, her voice carrying clearly across the quiet room. "Can you identify the man sitting at the defense table?" I looked directly at Marcus. He was staring down at his legal pad, refusing to meet the eyes of the father who raised him. "He is my son." I answered, my voice steady, carrying through the heavy silence. "His name is Marcus Mitchell." Jenkins walked me through the agonizing days following Brenda passing away. I told the jury about finding the broken reading glasses in her desk, about taking them to Andre in Sweet Auburn, about the tiny hidden camera port. The courtroom went entirely still as I described watching the video for the first time. "Well, what did you see on that screen?" Isaiah Jenkins asked, giving me the space to deliver the absolute truth. "I saw my son walk into my kitchen," I stated, gripping the wooden rail of the witness box, making sure my voice did not waver. "I saw him take a plastic bag of white pills from his pocket, and I saw him pour them directly into his mother's daily vitamin bottle. I saw him stand over her body later that night, checking his expensive silver watch, waiting exactly 12 minutes while she choked on her last breaths." A heavy collective gasp rippled through the gallery, but I did not look away from the jury. I wanted them to feel the ice-cold reality of his actions. Jenkins submitted the glasses into evidence, passing the physical frame to the jury box. Then she moved to the night of the arrest. She asked me to describe the confrontation in the dark living room, the wire Sergeant Vance taped to my chest, and the terrifying moment Marcus pulled the syringe from his black duffel bag. "Did he sound like a man who had lost his grip on reality?" Jenkins asked, bringing the focus right back to the core of the case. "Did he sound insane?" "No," I replied, shaking my head firmly. "He sounded like a lawyer closing a highly profitable deal. He bragged about forging my suicide note perfectly. He bragged about the potassium chloride being untraceable. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he was incredibly proud of his own twisted brilliance." Jenkins thanked me and returned to her table. Arthur Sterling stood up immediately, buttoning his tailored jacket, preparing to tear my testimony to shreds. He walked smoothly toward the witness box, leaning casually against the wooden rail. "Mr. Mitchell," Sterling began, his tone dripping with a fake manufactured empathy. "This is a devastating tragedy, and nobody is denying the immense pain you have suffered. But you have known Marcus for 39 years. He was a good boy, was he not? He was a loving son until this massive, crushing mob debt completely destroyed his life. He was a successful attorney," corrected calmly, refusing to let the expensive lawyer control the narrative. "He made his own choices. But surely you saw him deteriorating," Sterling pressed, raising his voice slightly, gesturing toward Marcus. "The sleepless nights, the overwhelming panic of violent criminals threatening his children. When he came to your house that night, he was a desperate, terrified man acting completely out of character. He was not in his right mind, Isaiah." I leaned forward in the wooden chair, looking directly into the defense attorney's eyes, feeling the righteous anger of a father who had lost his entire world. "He was not out of his mind, Mr. Sterling," I declared, my voice booming across the courtroom, echoing off the high oak ceilings. "He was completely out of money. He did not come to my house in a frantic panic. He brought a carefully forged suicide note. He brought a sterile syringe, and he brought a bottle of pills. He planned my murder with the exact same cold, calculating precision he used to murder my wife. He did not snap, counselor. He calculated the exact value of our lives, and he decided his gambling debt was worth more. Sterling stood completely frozen for a second, his smooth, theatrical rhythm entirely disrupted by the blunt, unbreakable truth. He tried to pivot, trying to question the legality of the hidden microphone, trying to suggest I had intentionally provoked Marcus into violence. I did not provoke him, I answered, shutting down his final desperate angle. I sat in a chair, and I let him brag about his own evil. My wife trapped him with a camera, and I trapped him with a wire. We caught a predator, Mr. Sterling. The defense attorney had absolutely nothing left. He could not break a father who had already survived the absolute worst pain imaginable. Sterling nodded stiffly, turning his back on me, and walked quickly back to the defense table, his massive, expensive reputation visibly dented. "No further questions, Your Honor," Sterling muttered, sitting down heavily next to my son. Judge Washington dismissed me from the stand. I walked slowly back down the center aisle, feeling a profound, heavy exhaustion settling deep into my bones, but also a quiet, undeniable peace. I had spoken for Brenda. I had laid the absolute truth right at the feet of the jury, completely destroying the fake insanity defense with the unbreakable reality of his greed. The trial was not over, but the monster was finally dragged out into the bright, unforgiving light of justice. The prosecution was not finished dismantling the expensive lies. The very next morning, Sarah Jenkins stood before the quiet courtroom, and she called Dr. Nathan Pierce to the witness stand. The older man in the tweed jacket walked down the center aisle looking completely terrified, sweating profusely under the bright, unforgiving courtroom lights. He was the exact same psychiatrist who had stood in the police precinct lobby holding the fraudulent psychiatric hold papers, trying to steal my freedom. Now he was sitting in the wooden box, swearing an oath to the court, his hands trembling violently as he gripped the microphone. Dr. Pierce Jenkins began, her voice sharp, cutting directly to the absolute core of the corruption. "You evaluated the defendant, Marcus Mitchell, multiple times over the last 3 years, did you not?" "Yes," the doctor stammered, his eyes darting toward the defense table, avoiding Arthur Sterling's furious glare. "I treated him for severe dissociative episodes and extreme anxiety." Jenkins did not pace. She simply picked up a thick, heavy financial ledger from her prosecution table. She walked slowly toward the witness box, dropping the heavy document right in front of the sweating psychiatrist. "Can you please explain to the jury?" Jenkins asked, her voice echoing with righteous, undeniable fury, "why the defendant paid you exactly $280,000 over those 3 years. The entire courtroom went dead silent. The jury leaned forward collectively, their eyes locked on the trembling doctor. "It was for private, highly specialized medical consultations," Pierce whispered, wiping his forehead with a wrinkled handkerchief, his voice completely lacking any professional authority. $280,000 for consultations, Jenkins repeated loudly, ensuring every single person in the room heard the absurd number. Or was it a retainer? Dr. Pierce, a massive illegal payoff to manufacture 9 completely fake psychiatric evaluations, carefully building a premeditated insanity defense just in case he ever got caught committing a violent crime. Objection. Sterling roared, leaping to his feet, his expensive suit jacket flying open, desperate to stop the absolute destruction of his entire legal strategy. Counsel is badgering the witness. Overruled, Judge Washington snapped immediately, staring coldly down from her elevated bench. "The witness will answer the direct question." Pierce looked at the judge, then at the jury, realizing his medical license and his freedom were entirely on the line. "I accepted the money," the doctor confessed, his voice breaking into a pathetic, ruined sob. "He paid me to document a history of mental illness that did not actually exist. He was perfectly sane. He just wanted an insurance policy against the legal system." A wave of absolute disgust washed over the jury box. The retired schoolteacher in the front row shook her head, staring at Marcus with pure, unadulterated contempt. The defense was completely dead murdered right there on the stand by their own corrupt, paid witness. Jenkins thanked the doctor and returned to her seat, leaving the defense table in complete, devastating ruins. Arthur Sterling was cornered, stripped of his lies, left with absolutely nothing but a desperate final gamble. He stood up, smoothing his tie, and he called Marcus Mitchell to the stand. My son stood up, walking slowly toward the witness box, trying to project the image of a broken, tragic victim. He took the oath, sat down, and looked pleadingly at the jury. Sterling tossed him a few soft, sympathetic questions, trying to draw out fake tears, trying to humanize the monster. Marcus played his part, crying about the mob debt, claiming he loved his mother, begging for mercy. But Sarah Jenkins was waiting for her turn, holding the physical, undeniable proof of his evil. She approached the stand, holding the small silver flash drive in her hand. "Marcus Mitchell," she said, her voice completely devoid of any sympathy. "You just testified that you loved your mother and that you lost your mind under the pressure of the gambling debt." "Yes," Marcus whispered, hanging his head, playing the absolute victim. Jenkins leaned forward, resting her hands firmly on the wooden rail of the witness box. "Did your temporary insanity force you to purchase lethal potassium chloride, swap her vitamins in the morning, and wait 12 exact minutes while she choked to death on the kitchen floor?" she demanded, her voice ringing like a heavy iron bell of justice. Marcus looked at the brilliant prosecutor, realizing the trap was completely inescapable. He could not lie, because the video was already in evidence. He could not admit it, because it was absolute, undeniable premeditation. He looked at Arthur Sterling, but the expensive lawyer just looked down at his legal pad, entirely defeated. Marcus took a shallow, shaky breath, gripping the edge of the wooden box. "On the advice of my counsel," my son stated, his voice completely flat, completely empty, "I invoke my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination." The gallery erupted in shocked whispers. Judge Washington banged her heavy gavel, demanding immediate order, but the damage was permanently, irrevocably done. In the eyes of the law, pleading the Fifth is a constitutional right. But in the eyes of 12 ordinary citizens sitting in a jury box, a man who refuses to answer for his own mother's murder is a man who is absolutely, undeniably guilty. Jenkins nodded slowly, turning her back on the broken man in the witness box. "No further questions, Your Honor," she declared, walking back to her table, leaving my son entirely alone with his own destruction. The jury did not take long. We sat in the hallway outside courtroom 6B, listening to the heavy rain hit the large windows. Renee Carter sat perfectly still next to me. We did not speak. There was absolutely nothing left to say. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, measuring the final agonizing moments of my son's freedom. 2 hours, that was all it took. 2 hours for 12 ordinary citizens of Fulton County to weigh the life of a greedy, arrogant lawyer against the absolute truth of a murdered mother. The heavy oak doors swung open. The bailiff stepped out into the crowded hallway, his face completely serious. "The jury's back," he announced, his voice carrying over the low hum of the reporters. My chest tightened, a heavy, familiar ache settling deep behind my ribs. I walked back into the massive courtroom, taking my seat in the front row. Arthur Sterling was already at the defense table, packing his legal pads into his expensive leather briefcase. The high-priced lawyer knew exactly what a fast verdict meant. He was completely beaten, his massive reputation permanently stained by the undeniable truth. Marcus was brought in through the heavy side door, wearing the same loose gray suit. He did not look like a powerful attorney anymore. He looked small, fragile, completely hollowed out by his own impending doom. The arrogance was completely gone, replaced by a raw, suffocating terror. He sat down heavily at the table, his hands shaking violently, refusing to look back at the gallery. Judge Helen Washington entered the room, her black robe flowing behind her. She took the elevated bench, looking out over the completely silent courtroom. The air was incredibly thick, heavy with the absolute crushing weight of justice. She turned her steady, unforgiving gaze toward the jury box. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the judge asked, her voice echoing clearly, "have you reached a verdict?" The foreperson, The retired school teacher from Decatur stood up straight. She held a stack of white paper in her hands, her expression completely resolute. "We have your honor," she replied, her voice firm, completely unbothered by the expensive defense team. The judge nodded slowly. "Please read the verdict." The courtroom was so quiet I could hear my own heart beating in my chest. On the charge of murder in the first degree and the premeditated death of Brenda Mitchell, the foreperson read, taking a slow, heavy breath, "We find the defendant Marcus Mitchell guilty." The word hit the room like a physical heavy hammer. Marcus flinched violently, his shoulders collapsing inward, his head dropping toward the polished wooden table. A woman in the gallery gasped loudly, but I did not make a single sound. I just stared at the back of his neck, feeling the cold, hard reality of his absolute ruin. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder against Isaiah Mitchell, the foreperson continued, not missing a single beat. "We find the defendant guilty." Sterling closed his eyes, rubbing his temples in complete defeat. "On the charge of massive financial embezzlement from the Mitchell family trust, guilty. On the charge of insurance fraud, guilty. On the charge of criminal conspiracy for the hiring of a contract killer, guilty." It was a complete, absolute, devastating sweep. Every single domino had fallen exactly as Brenda had planned. The corrupt psychiatrist, the expensive lawyer, the fake insanity defense, all of it was completely crushed by the undeniable truth my wife had recorded from beyond the grave. Judge Washington did not wait for a separate sentencing hearing. She looked down from her high bench, staring directly at the broken man sitting at the defense table. "Marcus Mitchell, please stand," she commanded, her voice carrying the absolute heavy weight of the law. Marcus struggled to his feet, his knees visibly shaking, leaning heavily against the wooden table just to stay upright. "You are a licensed attorney in this state," Judge Washington stated, her tone dripping with absolute righteous disgust. "You understood the law perfectly, and you chose to twist it to cover your own despicable greed. You traded the lives of your own parents, the people who raised you, to cover a gambling debt. You plotted, you poisoned, you hired a violent street killer, and you tried to steal your father's freedom. There is absolutely no place for you in civilized society." Marcus let out a ragged, pathetic sob, staring down at the floor, completely destroyed. "For the brutal, calculated murder of Brenda Mitchell, I sentence you to life in the Georgia State Penitentiary, without the possibility of parole," the judge declared, bringing the heavy wooden gavel down with a deafening absolute crack. "For the remaining charges, you will serve consecutive 20-year sentences. You will never, ever walk free again." This court is adjourned. The bailiff stepped forward immediately, grabbing Marcus roughly by the arms, pulling his hands firmly behind his back. The heavy steel handcuffs clicked loudly, locking his fate forever. They dragged him away from the defense table, pulling him toward the side door, toward a lifetime in a cold concrete box. As they pulled him through the heavy wooden frame, he looked back over his shoulder. He looked directly at me, his eyes wide, terrified, pleading for a mercy he absolutely did not deserve. I stood up from the front row, planting my feet firmly on the ground, staring right back at him. I did not blink. I did not shed a single tear. And I absolutely did not offer him any forgiveness. The door slammed shut, cutting him off from the world and taking the monster completely out of my life. The drive down to Jackson, Georgia took just over an hour. The sky was an unbroken sheet of winter gray, matching the heavy concrete walls of the state penitentiary. I parked my old sedan in the visitor lot, stepping out into the biting wind. I was not here to offer comfort, and I was certainly not here to offer forgiveness. I was here to look the monster in the eye one last time, to sever the rotting branch from my family tree completely. The processing room smelled heavily of bleach, stale sweat, and absolute defeat. The armed guards ran me through the metal detectors, stamping my hand, guiding me down a long, echoing corridor. Heavy steel doors slammed shut behind me, locking with a definitive metallic clang. I walked into the crowded visitation room, taking a seat at a small,